Um, turn down your cell phones.
Oh, that's a good call.
I am also in a
my phone.
Comic book auction on Facebook. I am getting alerts.
Are you participating in an auction right now?
Well, I mean, in as much as I have bids, and if somebody outbids me, you might hear boom.
And some cussing.
Just boom.
Boom. Okay.
I won't look at it unless you're talking.
That's great. Welcome back, everybody. This is chapter 2 of The Black Company. This chapter is entitled Raven. We're back with Yule. We're back with Lewell. And we're back with DM Phil.
Hello.
Hey.
Nice. It's been a little while since we've gotten together to do this. Schedules, as you know, all adults are, well, most responsible adults, besides myself, of course, have responsibilities and things that they have to do.
I think it was mostly you.
Bullshit, it was
you're
me.
the one going on vacation.
Well, I wanted to do this the next week.
Vacation?
No, sir. This does not get dumped on me. Anyhow, welcome back, everybody. Why don't we begin by summarizing what happened last week as quickly as can be?
You mean last episode?
Whatever.
Yeah, sure. Basically, we were introduced to the Black Company. They had a mission in, what city was that in they were in?
Barrel.
They were in Barrel working for some dude.
As Barrel the Stone, not the thing that the hobbits rode around in out of Lake Town.
Anyhow, they were working for their dude there. What was that guy's name? Do you remember?
Syndicate.
The Syndicate. Thank you very much. The Syndic.
Yeah.
Maybe we should start that over.
Well, he's the Syndic.
Okay. So, all right. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have done that.
I'll tell you what.
All right. I will give the summary.
All right, please do.
All right. Briefly.
All right, the summary.
They quit that commission. They were hired by this apparently dark empire from the north called their representative was Soulcatcher, and they quit their last commission. They got out of town. They enlisted with Soulcatcher, and now they're doing the bidding of this dark empire run by the Pale Lady. And they crossed the ocean. And that's it. That's the summary.
That's the summary. Yeah. They bailed.
They bailed on their original job. They took up an alliance with the enemy.
Yeah, it's terribly exciting.
And now they're working for the bad guys.
Yeah, they are.
They said straight up that these people are evil.
Yeah.
The Dominator and the Lady. I mean, the Dominator.
Yeah, well, whatever.
All right.
What can you do? All right, so this chapter in particular is approximately the same length as the previous chapter. It's about 50 pages. This chapter is, for the most part, from a very high-level view, the purpose of it is to show us that the Lady's rule is not unopposed. There's a war going on in the north. That is why the Black Company has been hired. They're a mercenary group to go and fight in this war. Though she permits it, there's a lot of animosity between her generals, who are the 10 or the Taken. And similarly, there's infighting among the rebel command. So it's a big mess. Everything's a big mess. And this chapter is in actuality a play by Soulcatcher against one of his allied generals, and it is unarguable. Soulcatcher wins this chapter. He wins twice. He embarrasses his opponent, who has to run off licking wounds. So anyway, let's get into the chapter. Who is introduced in this chapter, Yule?
First off, we have the pawnbroker.
He loan sharks the company is what he.
Yeah, he's the loan shark for the company. He gives them money, I guess, and stuff like that. Anyhow, he is one of the newer characters that we're introduced to. We're introduced to Raven, who is the title of the chapter. We're introduced to Flick, who is an old man that they rescue, and his granddaughter. What's her name? Like Beauty?
Darling.
We're introduced to the Limper, who's one of the Taken. We're introduced to Shifter, who is also one of the Taken.
Also, Shapeshifter is his full name.
Shapeshifter is his full name, yeah. We have a lot of other people that work under the Limper that we're introduced to. There's the most important one is this guy named Zwad. Zwad's like the Limper's right-hand man, basically.
Left hand.
Yeah.
I don't know why that matters, but he calls him the left hand.
So those are the main characters. I'm sure we'll run into a couple. Oh yeah, Pickles also, who is the quartermaster.
Pickles is the quartermaster. Yeah, exactly.
For the company.
All right. So before we get into the summarizing of the chapter and like what's going on and all that kind of stuff, and us being talking heads and all that, I wanted to mention a couple of things. One is that I listened to a podcast with Steven Erickson and Glen Cook talking with Jonathan Strahan. And they Glen Cook apparently does not like high-level analytics about literature. He doesn't like it. Like, he thinks it's crap.
What do you mean high-level analytics?
Like what they do at grad school, where they talk about books and they break them down, kind of like what we're doing.
We're sharing this book because, it's kind of maybe a little bit down the memory hole for people.
Yeah. No, that's fair, but we are also analyzing his book.
Sure thing. We're just appreciating it.
We are all fans.
Yeah, we're not like, it's not a dissection and a thesis that we're writing here.
No, what I'm really aiming for with this is to really truly understand the book and not miss a lot of details, which I know I did the first reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to avoid that and talk to my friends about the book. And also, can you back up for just a second? I need to see that note. Isaac Arthur is a YouTuber, and he has a very recent YouTube video out called Hitchhiking the Galaxy. And he refers to Glen Cook at about minute 13 and 10 seconds in there because apparently he's a big fan as well. And he's much more current with the series than I am. Thank you, Philip. For those of you that are listening and want to get more about Glen Cook, Isaac Arthur is amazing. It's all science and futurism with Isaac Arthur on YouTube. Good stuff. Okay, so anyway, let's begin breaking this chapter down. 50 pages, not a big deal. As you will mention prior, the chapter opens up with a card game, and then the players of the card game are summoned by the captain.
Yeah, they're in a bar, actually, also.
Yeah, they're in a bar.
And there's a little fight that occurs also in that bar.
Well, it's not really a fight.
It's a pretty awesome scene, though.
It is. So what's the purpose of that scene, Yule?
Maybe to show us, like, how badass One Eye is.
Yeah, I would say so. It gives us a very clear understanding of what One Eye is capable of.
And not only that, but what they're doing. They're just in town getting drunk all the time. I mean, One Eye is shit-faced, without a doubt. And I mean, he says that straight up. And when he's called on it, he's like, yeah, no kidding, I'm drunk.
Well, he's offering to pay.
We get drunk.
He wouldn't pay otherwise.
Well, yeah, well, so it is right in the beginning, you see that they pay up front. And later on, as the chapter or as the scene progresses, they are told that they need to pay again. Or not pay again, but pay for the first time. And they're like, hey, that's BS. We pay up front just like everybody else. That's the policy of the place. And there's this big meaty guy, and they say he has like hog's head hands, so he's like really big. And they're like, hey, One Eye, you picked this piece of crap place. Why don't you do something about it? And he magics up this four-armed like little monkey that's like ripping the waitress a new one. And he makes this bowl disappear, and it reappears, and it's snakes all over the place. And then the bartender who or the owner of the establishment, his mouth goes agape, and then like roaches and stuff come out of it.
Scarab beetles,
yeah. And so like the scene ends with them just like chuckling as they're like leaving the place. And they are summoned by the captain, and they go to a real nice place. It's like a posh bar, if you will.
Yeah.
And everybody's like looking really good over there, except for, the black company coming in looking like.
I got the impression it was like fancy gardens with like the ultra elites of society.
Yeah.
And there they are. They're like mercenaries. Like someone took a turd in a punch bowl. Well, that was them at the party.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So they go and they meet up with the captain, and he's like, hey, he points to his chest where the soul catcher pin that they have is on his. And he's like, hey, you guys might want to do the same thing. And that's kind of a thing because you see around the room, everybody has their allegiance pinned to their chest in this place.
Yeah. So there's one of them is Nightcrawler. One of them is the Limper. I think the Howler. Is that one of them?
Yes. Yeah, I think it was the Howler.
And who's the fourth?
Stormbringer.
So those are 3 that we didn't even know existed until this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
But those are 3 more of the 4 more of the Taken. And so this is kind of like a meet and greet locale for the really, really prominent members of the ladies' ruling class. This is where they gather to do business.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of shocked when they're seeing the black company mercenaries in there, even though, their captain is probably well dressed and he's got his pin on.
It's also mentioned that just a little bit prior that the captain had been spending a lot of time with the upper crust people that are around here right now, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So, while they're out drinking, playing cards, playing tonk, the captain's hanging out with some important people.
Yeah, he's hobnobbing, as it were.
Yeah.
Well, on my first I guess it would be the second reading of this chapter, I did not really understand. I still kind of don't really understand. It's obviously a bar of some kind, even though it's gardens and it's secluded, and it's designed in such a way that whatever. It's not important, but Raven is the reason that they're there.
Yeah.
Raven is their host.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the people in that area, he's wearing rags. How is he the host and he's wearing like rags? I don't get it.
Yeah, they were like, oh my God, the black company's bad enough. But then this guy comes out of the corner and he's looking like Croker describes him as a person who's handsome, but looks really bad and is walking with a limp. So he's probably he's overcoming an injury previously.
Yeah. But he's wearing gray rags.
Yeah, rags.
He's not dressed well. And it's noticed immediately by Lord Jelena.
Yeah, he's walking down with some other people.
Who's all puffed up, overweight, breathing hard, pink in the face.
The kind of person that...
It's seeing these assholes. And he decides he's going to say something.
Yeah, he does. I'm sorry. I was going to say also that he kind of talks about him like he's the kind of person that the real piece of crap that sends people to their deaths and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's complicated. It is complicated. He's a commander, though. I mean, he's described as being so high up in the military ranks that he could have been one of the Taken if he'd been any higher.
Right.
And he's judged by the people there as being one of those kind of prick commanders that enjoys putting his troops through miserable experiences just for the joy of it.
Yeah.
And when he decides to come over and talk to these guys, he sees Raven. He sees his face for the first time and realize, oh boy.
And Raven doesn't move a muscle.
Yeah, but he thought Raven was dead. And Raven says as much.
Yeah, and then he bolts.
Yeah, he bolts with all the group of people that he was with that were milling around, pointing the finger and et cetera. They have a heated discussion and then disappear. And then 3 latecomers come in, 2 men and a woman. And
they're from that party that left just now.
Well, they're looking for that party.
Yeah.
They come in late. They're looking for that same group with Lord Jelena. And they decide that they're going to get some information out of these riffraff.
Now, but just before that, we're finding out that Raven wants to join the Black Company, and he is changing, I guess, his elite. He wants to work for Soulcatcher, having worked with another one of the Taken. Do we
I
know?
don't know that we know that yet.
Well, what we do know is that he wants to join the Black Company, and that he has a few matters that he has to take care of, which includes killing 5 people before he can join the Black Company, because he has, these situations that might affect them.
Well, he's got business to attend to.
He's got business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the interesting part there is that the captain tells him, is like, well, you can't join our company till all of your matters are taken care of. And he said, well, how much time do I have? And he said, well, until we leave. And he's like, when's that? Like tonight?
Yeah. And then everybody's like, one eye. They're like, wait a second, we're leaving? We thought we had some more time.
Yeah, the poor lieutenant just found a woman for the first time in years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they got
like, I don't think I ever saw him with a lady.
Yeah, that's the first.
Well, another point I did want to mention is that the captain brought up to his crew that that Raven wanted to sign on. And he's like, we haven't had a new member in years, which I find shocking. I mean, for a mercenary company that they just, it's
not only that, but who was it that signed on? They call him a witch doctor.
One Eye?
Yeah.
He was their last recruit.
Yeah. I assume probably him and Tom, right?
Yeah. Ages ago. Yeah, that is a good point. Why wouldn't they be recruiting constantly? Unless, of course, the people are just not of good enough caliber.
I think they're just very picky. They have the highest selection criteria imaginable, and they expect a lot out of their recruits. And they said it. It's like the only way to leave the company is feet first.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's you're sold.
Yes, well, there's a good. We'll get to a very nice moment soon that I think illustrates why the Black Company, or how it's kind of like it shows how picky the Black Company is and why they're picky. It's got to do with discipline, and I think you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so they have that little confrontation with Lord Jelena. The latecomers show up. They demand information in a really, really snotty way, and you can see Raven. He reacts to this guy's voice. He doesn't have to see him. He knows who this guy is. And then in a flash, in just a flash, he's got a dagger in his hand. The guy's throat's cut open. The dagger is deep in the chest of the second man. And then he grabs the woman by the throat and he strangles her with one hand. And she says, I'm sorry or something.
Well, she's like,
have mercy. He does not. He does not. He kills her.
With tears.
Oh, so sad, right? Well, he kills all 3 of them in a heartbeat. And then apparently he's only got 2 more people to kill, because there were 3 of them right there. So he takes the wedding band off of this woman's left hand. Croker speculates that that was his wife right then and there, and that this is just kind of an indication of the way that the lady runs her empire, that she enjoys this sort of game of backstabbing and treachery among the nobles and the elites. And she watches it happen, and she does not discourage it whatsoever. So that pretty much ends their moment there in that city.
Well, and this is the important part. Those 3 people wore the Limper's badges.
Well, that's not the important part.
Well, it means they were aligned.
Yeah. Everybody here is aligned.
Well, that's true.
Everybody in this posh garden is wearing one of those badges. Everybody. Except for the Black Company, because they don't wear their badges. All right. So next, the Black Company heads north into bleaker and bleaker lands. They literally do leave that night. They do literally leave without Raven.
Yeah, he doesn't get done.
So anyway, they head further and further north. They're on horseback. They're moving at a pretty good clip. Their goal at this point is to meet up with the Limper, because they're supposed to support him and his army up in Forsberg. While they're traveling north, they pass within 3 miles of the Tower of Charm, and it is described as a monolithic block, cubed stone, dark stone, just a big cube of stone, over 500 feet tall. So I started looking into castles and how long it takes to build a castle. And this isn't just a castle. This is 500 feet tall. And there's no indication that they use magic to build in this. There's indication that they use magic to support structures like that ship. But nevertheless, a medieval castle of decent size could take between 2 and 100 years to build. And this is 500 feet tall. I'm guessing that it took a little while to build this thing. But the lady built it, or had it built for her, after she was resurrected.
Yeah, so they have to skirt around that tower.
They're not going there. They're heading further to the north. The lady built her castle farther south in Forsberg. Now, there's some significance to Forsberg, and it's got to do with where the Barrowlands are. The lady and the 10 taken were all imprisoned in the Barrowlands, which is basically where the Black Company is heading right now. It is described as the far north above Or, the city of Or, is where the Barrowlands are, where 400 years ago the lady and the 10 were interred. It follows that stubborn necromantic investigations of wizards from Or had resurrected the lady and the 10, and that their descendants are to this day doing battle with the lady. It's insane. I mean, that is such a neat, that's so cool. It's so cool. They messed up. They know it, and their descendants are dealing with the repercussions to this day. Good stuff. All right. So anyway, on the travel, when they're on their way up to meet with the Limper, apparently they're dawdling. They're taking a little too much time, and they're just on horseback and they're cruising on up. And an outrider from the Limper's company comes, and he demands that they hurry up, and he's a bit snotty about it. He's a bit snotty.
Yeah, he's cursing at them. He's not really giving them the proper respect that they feel that they're due. And the captain, or no, the lieutenant for the captain, because the captain doesn't want to get involved in this kind of stuff. He wants to make this guy respect the Black Company. And so he has his people pull the guy off his horse, this outrider off his horse.
No, he doesn't pull him off.
Oh, they yank him off the horse. He
says, "Hey, Elmo. Yeah. Hey, Elmo, 20 lashes."
Yeah.
Elmo kind of cruises up to this guy and knocks him off of his saddle.
Well, no, you skip a part. He's like, "No stinking sellsword is going to," boom, they knock him off. That calls for another 10 lashes.
Yeah. So he's going to get 30 lashes.
Yeah.
What's the significance of ripping his shirt first?
Oh, so they can get the skin.
You don't think it was going to happen on the second one?
They don't want to kill the guy. Like, embedding the cloth and material into the skin will cause infection.
Okay, that's cool.
So they strip the shirt off so that they're just dealing with bare skin, so that it's easy for Croker to clean him up, get him a new shirt, and get him back on the road. And he does earn respect, and he does deliver his message, and he does receive the message to deliver back to the Limper, and then he's off. And Croker applauds the kid. He's like, "You did pretty good for a Northerner. You took it well." But he instructs him, too. He instructs him on how to speak to the captain. He's teaching this kid manners. And
that's when Raven shows up.
Raven catches up. Raven catches him up. He's like, "Oh, Limper's going to have your hearts out for that." And the captain does not give a rat's ass. He's like, "Whatever. We're not a second-class company." And they move on.
Well, at first they're like, "Hey, did you get your stuff taken care of?" And he's like, "I got the one, and I let the other one go. The most important stuff has been taken care of." And Croker assumes it was the woman. And of course, the captain's not very happy with the fact that Raven still has one loose thread out there. But they're okay with it in the end.
Good enough, right?
Good enough.
They in the last chapter, they said that they could not stand to lose even one member of the Black Company, and they lost over 100. So I would say they're a little bit on the not desperate side necessarily, but beggars can't be choosers almost. And the captain likes Raven. Like, it's discussed several times that he and Raven get along. They're cut from the same cloth. So he doesn't want to tell Raven no, but he's conflicted.
He seems pretty badass also.
Raven?
Yeah. I mean, I know they were just upper class people, but he throttled those people pretty quick. I mean, blinding, he's like, they say, oh, he must have learned that from like a magician or a wizard, being able to get his knife out as quick as he does.
Well, they can't even see it. It's just in his hand all of a sudden. All right. So they arrive in Forsberg. They were given a huge war chest, and Soulcatcher told them to behave in a gentlemanly manner. So when they arrive in Forsberg, they pay for everything that they're asking for, which is abnormal because even they in wartime would just take what they wanted. But I guess Soulcatcher is of the opinion that it's better to treat these people with some respect. People there are happy enough to take their money, but they know they're just one of the, they're on one side or another and the war is going on and these poor peasants just have to kind of live with it. So anyway, they set up camp and they're trying to stay out of the way of everybody because they've just gotten there. They're completely exhausted. As you will mention, they've been traveling for a long time. They're trying to arrive such that they aren't exhausted so that they can actually be of assistance to the Limper. They've got their, what are they called? They're not sentries.
Pickets.
Their pickets are out. And you've got a little bit of magicking going on to try to keep those guys awake and astute. And there are some spies detected sneaking up on them. They know that they're about to be ambushed. A glamour is cast by the three wizards, and they evade the ambush completely.
Because once again, it's better to not fight if you don't have to. They're getting paid for it just the same.
That's right. They are. All right, so this brings up something that Yule and I were talking about before Philip arrived, and that is, I am of the impression that because of reading in the chapter, that the wizards are a little bit cavalier about using their power in public. And it'll become more apparent later on as the chapter goes along, but they use their powers in view of other people. And it's mentioned more than once that their luck would turn if the enemy knew that they had wizards in their party. So just bear that in mind as we go forward because it'll come up again and again in this chapter. So anyway, they use magic to get out of a really bad situation, and then on we go.
Well, just one quick. So they were doing all that magicking, and they detected the spies, and they're like getting around it. But in this moment was when Raven was like gone. They don't know where he is, and then he shows up with like the thumbs of these spies
and a body.
And so one of my questions is they're like, hey, what are you going to do with this body? He's all, stick it in the fire feet first. They won't waste time wondering how they knew we were out here.
Right. They will assume that a spy was captured and tortured for the information, which is why I think it's very suspicious that they use magic so plainly in public later on.
Well, I mean, this is one instance where they're using the magic and he's covering it up.
They are covering it up here, yes. They do a good job here. And he says also that they're counting coup, which is why he had all the thumbs.
Yeah, that's what it is, counting coup.
All right, so the next scene, you're guys good with moving on?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next scene is very similar to the first scene in the book, in a sense, that we get to see what one of the wizards is capable of. The wizards they have this history. One Eye and Goblin have this history of like antagonization towards each other. And this ride on horseback, we have One Eye basically falling asleep in his saddle. And Goblin, who didn't rise to the bait when One Eye was trying to pick a fight, has bided his time. And now that One Eye is basically asleep, he starts picking at him with a little bit of magic. At first, it's just a horsefly biting the tail of the horse. The horse rears, dumps One Eye on the ground. One Eye punches the horse and then regrets it because his hand hurts. Gets back on his horse, and then he's riding along again, almost asleep. And then a bird comes along and takes a giant purple shit all over him. And he's just, he's upset. He's upset. But this is Goblin creating these effects. And then finally, the third one, they go over a rise, and ahead of them, there are numerous little monkey-sized versions of One Eye flying around and taking turns kissing the ass of a horse. And it's not until that moment that One Eye understands this is Goblin. Goblin's doing this. He's like, you little son. And Croaker's kind of laughing, and One Eye threatens Croaker of all things.
Okay, so he threatens Croaker because Croaker's like, I gave the point to Goblin. In this little feud that they're having. But he's talking about One Eye, and he says he is a more skilled wizard than Goblin or Silent, but not half of what he would have us believe. Right. If he would execute half his threats, he could be a peril to the Taken. And he also goes on to say, Silent is more consistent and Goblin is more inventive.
Yes.
So just a little thing about their wizardry.
We just saw it too. Just saw it. Like in the very first scene when One Eye produces magic to get his way, it's kind of stereotypical scary magic, right? It's like this illusion that goes out and actually causes damage to people to get his way. Whereas when Goblin wants to get his way, he uses trickery. He uses illusions that like indirectly affect the person that he wants to play with. So I think that Yule's point is it's in evidence in this chapter, even though it's also explicitly stated in this chapter.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, so those are the wizards picking fights, which is quite hilarious in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's again, this is just further showing you how powerful they are and giving you a little sense of who they are as people also.
Yes.
That's nice, artfully done.
It is artfully done, and it's good character development, plain and simply. It's just good character development. I mean, I really do think that Glen Cook plotted this chapter out well and filled it in. He filled it in well. I mean, I think that he was very smart about how he built this chapter. All right, so anyway, moving on. The Black Company, in their travels, encounters a battlefield. Am I correct? That's the next thing?
Yeah, that's the piece I was thinking of.
All right, so the Black Company arrives at the scene of a recent battle. Okay, so the battlefield. It's like muricated with these little black humps in the earth. And Raven explains that this is what makes the Taken so dangerous. They're actually able to cast spells that kill people. And it was heat that caused the earth to mound. They're perfectly circular, and inside each one are the ashen remains of bodies. It's just bones, charred bones. And the weapons and armor that are present inside these black circles, it's like they've been melted. They're not fully melted, but the heat was so intense that the metal became like wax and folded and bent and under its own weight. Croaker checks one of them out. He sees everything that I've described. He checks another one. It's identical. He doesn't need to see any more. He knows that the Taken are capable of devastating magic.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about this is he said it was like it was a solid like night and day boundary. Like you could straight line, you could draw it with a compass. And they asked One Eye, it's like if you ever become this powerful, you let me know. And he said, if I ever become this powerful, I'll scare myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And another interesting thing I thought was that despite the fact that the Taken are able to cast spells this powerful and their opposition is pretty much equally powerful. We've got Raker on the other side of Limper in this particular battle. Limper lost this battle. Limper had to retreat despite the fact that there are rebel bodies everywhere. That is what's going on here. Limper is losing. He's losing Forsberg, which is why the Black Company is here. They're here because he's losing. After the Limper retreated from this battle, the Black Company is still trying to catch up with Limper and his army. And in the process, they come across a nameless village. And there are 20 or 25 of Limper's soldiers still in the village. Their scouts found it. One of them came back, made the report. Elmo's told to take 10 men and go back. So they do. Takes Raven. Croaker volunteers. Elmo says Croker's an idiot, but he takes him anyway. Oh yeah, and we're also shown that Elmo can barely count. He counts on his fingers. He names off a bunch of names, counts them on his finger, and then he adds 3 more. So he's not real good with numbers, but he is apparently an extremely intelligent gentleman.
Well, you also are getting introduced to more black company names: Doughbelly, Otto, Pee-wee, Whitey, Billy Goat. Wait, actually, Whitey was in the first chapter. Is he one that got? Is he one of the guys that got poisoned? I know, but I remember that name. So Whitey, Billy Goat, and Raven go along, and Silent.
All right, so I'm going to describe this.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to describe this scene rather quickly because it's extremely complicated. But essentially, there is a group of Limper soldiers who are in the process of sexually assaulting a 9-year-old girl and forcing an old man to watch. Raven and Croker are already kind of sick to their stomachs because they've seen a lot of dead children on the battlefield. It's not a battlefield. This is not a battlefield. This is a village of 200 houses, almost all of which are burning or burned. There are dead bodies everywhere. None of them are military age. They're either women or children. And they get on their horses to see a little bit better about what's going on with these guys that are gathered in a circle. And when they see it, Raven kind of snaps. He's picked up a bow and arrows off of a dead kid that he found earlier, and he just puts a bolt right through one of those guys' heads, the guy that was about to assault the little girl. Then he pops another one that's holding the old man, and then Elmo tells one of his soldiers to go get the old man. And we're not talking about the old man there. We're talking about the captain. And then one of the Limper's troops runs off to go get their captain. And they have this encounter together. Captain on captain, essentially. Raven tries to kill another man, and Elmo uses his sword and just snaps the bowstring. He won't let him do it. He's like, no more. You left your old life behind. And Raven does not want to leave his old life behind in this moment. He says it's harder than he imagined it would be because he knows that captain. He wants to kill that enemy captain, but he can't. So when the captains confer, our captain, the captain, he shames them, the Limper's troops. He's like, these people are under the protection of the lady, are they not? And they can't deny it. They are. This is the lady's territory, and they're raping and murdering her civilians, essentially. So there's not going to be any repercussions here other than revenge. The captain, Elmo, the lieutenant, Croker, Raven, despite the fact that Raven murdered 2 soldiers in an allied army, isn't going to matter at all because they still do have the moral high ground, even though they're working for an evil empire. Is there anything you'd like to add, Yul?
Yeah, sure. He writes, war is a cruel business prosecuted by cruel men.
Yeah.
When he's discussing the Limper's people doing their acts. He also, when that Captain Lane is the guy's name.
Yeah.
He runs away.
Yeah. Raven
mutters, I should know better anyway. He's only a butt boy.
What do you think that means, Yul?
Well, Croker asked a leading question. It drew a blank stare. I have no idea. I guess I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a homosexual slur, I guess.
I don't think so. I think he's a sycophant. I think he's just one of those guys that nods and says yes and does whatever he's told.
He's a brown noser.
Yeah.
All right, so he's got his nose in someone's ass.
I think so, yeah, because there is no indication, there's no sexual orientation involved with what's going on as far as I can tell, right?
Yeah, I couldn't figure it out at first, but now talking about it makes sense. Yeah, I had just assumed that it may have been some sort of slur, but that makes more sense that he's just
Well, it is a slur. It
Yeah.
is a slur, but at the same time, he admits that he's not important enough to really kill. He's just mad. He's still angry. He wants to kill everybody involved in whatever happened to him.
Also, this is when we first hear Zwad's name, I do believe.
That is true. Colonel Zwad.
What?
Yeah, no, he mentions his name.
Juad. How do you say it?
It's Zouad.
All right, here we go. He is the Limper's #1 villain.
That's
He was,
Colonel Zwad.
yeah, Colonel Zwad, or yeah, exactly. He political liaison, among other euphemisms. His name had occurred in a few overhead conversations between Raven and the captain.
Overheard,
yes. And then Croker assumes that it's Raven's intended 5th victim also.
Yes.
Oh, one other thing. It's also mused that the Limper is directly involved in the misfortunes that led Raven to coming and joining the Black Company.
Yes.
Because he was observed to be injured, thought dead, and which surprised Jelena. And so here we are.
And everybody that he's been going after has worn the emblem of Limper. So on some capacity, he was working for Limper before he joined the Black Company, and they thought he was dead. And now he's back and he's killing them all.
Or potentially a different Taken member who has a problem with the Limper also.
True enough, I suppose. Yeah, and he doesn't seem to be afraid of Limper at all. But he knows, though. That's the thing. I guess you're right. It could be any one of them.
But he also has the fortitude. He's just not afraid of threats. He's not afraid of his life, for his life.
Uh-huh.
So he's not afraid of the Limper because he's not afraid of death. Does that make any sense?
One thing, so I agree with that. But when they lash the Limper's man, when they whip that guy, Raven shows up and says he's gonna have your throats for that.
He's gonna cut out your hearts.
Yeah, and it's like, does he care or doesn't he care?
Well, he didn't do it.
Very good. Well, right? He's with them.
Basically when he said that, the purpose of him saying that is to reveal that Raven knows what the Limper is like. He has prior knowledge of the Limper, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I meant when I said that there's a lot of evidence to show that they're connected, but it's not really clear what their connection is. And that's one of the reasons I'm particularly fond of this chapter, is that Glen Cook knows the backstory for Raven. He knows exactly what's going on, and he doesn't reveal everything. He makes us guess.
Well, there's no way that it can be revealed because it's all through Croker.
No. It can be revealed. It can, because there's entire sections in this chapter that are just dialogue that go on, and it's somebody talking. And there's no reason why Croker couldn't be there when Raven's just talking about his past. But Raven's character doesn't talk about his past.
Only with the captain.
Well, it gets back to what I was saying, how much I appreciate this novel about this. Croker, this story is told from the point of view of Croker as historian, not Croker's story, not necessarily anybody else's story. But if Croker doesn't know about it, it doesn't get into the annals because he's not omniscient.
Right. All right. I have a note here for some reason about page 71. So I need to. Oh, it's the description of Soulcatcher making contact.
Well, before we go there, if you don't mind.
No, go for it.
They were talking about going into these villages with nothing but bodies everywhere. And, Elmo shows that, no matter how tough he is, he has a heart. Find the quote.
Just to add in a little bit, Croker also is like, when he first sees this place and there's kids dead, he's like, oh, not kids. And he actually is saying this out loud. He realizes that he's saying this out loud. We even see a situation where a mother is trying to protect her kid.
Grandmother.
It's just in vain.
Yes, in
Just a
vain.
sentence, in vain.
Indicating that the child was killed regardless of the woman being killed too.
Oh, and basically Croker says the same thing. He's like, for me, there's a big difference between adults and kids. And they said there was nobody there of fighting age.
The one, okay, so that's a little bit complicated by the fact that the kid that died that Raven got the bow off of was like 17 years old, and he was wearing the accoutrement of a standard soldier.
Yeah, but that's like a Boy Scout.
It is sort of, but he killed 4 people. He killed 4 people with that bow before they killed him. And Croker, I believe, is the one that's speculating that they had started burning, killing before this kid got involved, but he probably didn't make it any better. And Raven says the kid should have run off. He should have run off and lived to be a hero to fight another day. And Croker assumes that he's intimating there's a parallel between his own life. So that's the way that Cook reveals information about Raven.
In assumption.
Yeah. But we also know that Croker is pretty astute. His assumptions can fairly well be treated as gospel. As far as we can accept it, we don't have to trust it entirely, but it's the only information that we're going to get. So
The one thing is we as readers will assume that Croker is trustworthy and honest. But even within the story, even a little bit, he opens himself up to the reader, like when he's talking about the lady and he says how he is writing about who he thinks she is, and it becomes like a romantic tale and things like that.
Yes.
But even then, he still sometimes has shown that he'll fib a little bit also.
Well, he will speculate, but I think he's generally pretty clear when he's speculating.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes it clear that he is. He just doesn't. Glen Cook does a fantastic job of separating fact from Croker's speculations and musings. I think that's an important point. But the point is, it's a human being being the historian, and that element of humanity is still a very important part of telling a story. Do you buy that?
Nicely said. Yes, I think so. All right. So let's move on. I want to talk about this moment on page 71 when, for the very first time, I believe, we're exposed to the idea that the Taken can basically invade your mind. But they can only do it to wizards, I think, at least at this point in time. So Goblin suddenly stiffened. His eyes rolled up. A whine slipped past his lips. Rose in pitch, he crumpled. One eye reached him a step ahead of me, began slapping his cheeks. His habitual hostility had vanished. So when it happens, and in this case, it's Soulcatcher reaching out to One Eye. No, Goblin. I'm sorry. And he basically just freezes in place. He has no control, and they communicate. The Soulcatcher and Goblin are able to communicate. Soulcatcher gives him orders, and Goblin passes them on, but he's completely incapacitated in the process. He says he's gone now. Woo, gone. What the hell? The Limper went to the lady instead of coming at us head on. Yeah, okay, so anyway, let's talk about that. Let's see if I'm on the right page.
The Limper went and ran to Monty because he couldn't handle his siblings. Or his cousins, maybe, if the Black Company would be that.
Well, the Black Company, regardless, he can't handle Soulcatcher.
He's going to tattle.
Yeah. He wanted to get rid of the Black Company. He didn't like them. Okay, let's talk about the Circle of 18. I don't know really in what context it's brought up in the book, but we're introduced to the notion that there is a circle of 18 wizards. These are the descendants of the original wizards who used the necromantic magic on accident to release the lady and the Taken. They are the Rebel High Command. Raker is one of them. This is Limper's antithesis on the white side.
The reason why they're brought up is because when Goblin is invaded by Soulcatcher is like telling them that there's bad blood between Limper and Soulcatcher, and they're supposed to leave him alone, and he's supposed to leave them alone, but at the same time she really wants to stick it, or Soulcatcher really wants to stick it to the Limper. And so what happens is Elmo's like, if he wants us to embarrass the Rebel and Limper both by taking the fortress at Deal, why don't we just round up the circle of 18 also? So that's why they're brought in. And again, artfully done, within the context of conversation, finding out not only who the wizards are of the 18 who can actually maybe take it to the Taken. It's nice. I like it.
It is nice. It's funny though, because they view taking the fortress at Deal as equivalent to taking on the 18 wizards, and they do it in one evening.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
There's another card game. This is like the third card game that's taken place in this chapter. But there's a card game. Raven has gone on the turnip patrol, which is what Pickles normally does. The quartermaster usually goes into town, picks up supplies, brings it back to the fortress that they took overnight one night, which was supposed to be such a big deal. Anyway, they've been living there for a month or so. And while they're playing this card game, they realize that Raven and company should have been back by now. So Elmo, the lieutenant, Croaker, and some others, they get some horses together and they head on into town to see what's the hubbub. Very interesting though. During this card game, before they decide to leave, Pickles is used as a information dump to tell us that there is a prophecy. Several, in fact. And some very superstitious folks up here in the north, and they believe that the White Rose has been reincarnated in order to fight the lady. The White Rose was the woman who 400 years ago interred the lady and the Taken, but was not able to destroy them. Oh, and the Dominator. She defeated the Dominator, the lady, and the 10. Interred them all.
And she's reincarnated in a child somewhere.
Well, that's what they believe.
Oh, prophecy.
Yeah. It's a fantasy novel, therefore it must be real.
This is the Rebel prophecy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the whole purpose of Pickles being introduced in this chapter, as far as I can tell. And to
get Raven to be on the turnip patrol. Because Pickles was not feeling well and actually wanted to play cards, it seems.
He had a tummy ache, I believe, was what it was. Anyway, so we're also introduced to the old man and his granddaughter by name at this point, because Pickles and Raven have kind of gotten close to Flick, the grandfather, and Darling, the little girl. So we know their names now. It's stated that Darling has taken a shine to Raven and basically follows him around everywhere. And because he's on the turnip patrol, they don't see her around right now. But they go hunting. Go ahead.
Flick was the one that told Pickles this information about the prophecy and stuff.
Yeah, they're locals. So they're privy to all this information, which the Black Company is not privy to. All right, so let's move on. The turnip patrol is late in returning. As Elmo, the lieutenant, and Croaker go in search of, was it Goblin or One Eye? I don't remember which one. One of the wizards detects an ambush on the road, and they say it's hard to cast magic when you're on a horse, but he's able to do it anyway. So they basically sneak up on the ambusher and kill him. Or them. I suppose it was them. So they get to town. They meet up with a stableman named Corny, who leads them to the wounded. His stable's been burned down in some kind of dastardly attack. Raven is near death. Candy is like, you need to get to him first. He's the most important victim. Croaker gets his stitching kit out and goes to town, starts stitching them back together. I know both of you want to talk right now. Let's go.
There was one dead.
The only person that's dead is Flick, the grandfather of Darling. He stepped in front of people trying to attack Raven because Raven saved him and his granddaughter's life. And But honestly, because he died, Raven lives. That's all I have to say about that. Like, he would not have lived if any more of those attacks had gone through to Raven. So he saved Raven's life. So anyway, so they roll into town, and they want everybody to get out of the way. So One Eye casts magic that creates these shadowy creatures that are like weasels with glowing eyes and sharp fangs that chase everybody indoors. Now tell me that is not obvious magic. How are they hiding? How are they disguising the fact that they have wizards in the Black Company when they use magic that brazenly?
I just didn't know if it was that important, since they are pretty much running the place.
They don't run this town.
Oh, they're not running this town.
Outside of town.
Okay, I kind of assumed that they were like, I mean, I know that they just suffered an attack.
It's overrun with rebels. It's overrun with rebels, and they're using magic out in the open. Like, how do the enemies of these guys not know that they have wizards in their party at this point? I honestly think it's an oversight and a little bit of a plot hole.
But they got to deal with the Limper's people at the same time also.
They don't have to chase everybody off the streets with obvious magic. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's obvious.
If you got to get stuff done, you got to do it.
I don't know, man.
Well, I agree. They're cavalier and reckless with their power, but at the same time, you have a high threat level, and the smartest thing you can do is to get rid of the unknown variables. So you chase all the peasants back to their houses, and the only people left in the streets are the ones that are not the good guys.
Nobody's a good guy.
Well, that's true. There are no good guys, but they're certainly not rebels.
But they took care of the rebels then afterwards, right? I mean, the people that ran away, but I mean,
yeah,
they
you know how it is. All it takes is one person to see that there's a wizard in the party, and eventually, it doesn't matter. You can kill all the rebels that are in town. Eventually, word will still get out that, you know, somebody saw them using a wizard, and if they're trying to hide the fact that they have wizards because it's an advantage that they want to leverage, and yet they use it so brazenly. It's like I just think it's a little bit. It doesn't make a lot of sense in some way. Anyway, let's move on because it's just a difference of opinion. It doesn't matter. All right, so it is revealed by Corny that the people that committed this attack were not rebels. These were not the whites. These are not the enemy side. This was the Limper's guys. This was Zwad and his one of his buddies, and then a bunch of street thugs that they hired to kill Raven. This was an attack on Raven. That's what this was. And they almost succeeded. Raven's very close to death. So old One Eye, he fixes up a concoction at the request of Croaker. Croaker stitches him up. One Eye gets the chicken broth concoction down his throat. And they start doing a little bit of research. Well, it's obvious that Limper approved of the attack. Like, Zwad did not do this without the Limper's permission, basically. And Elmo, as I mentioned earlier, is described as being a pretty sharp cookie. He decides to set a trap for Zwad. He's gonna pin this guy and get him. And they're gonna use Corny to do it because they know Corny's a spy, even though they've let him run amok amongst them. And okay, so let's discuss how do they set up the trap? What's the trap, Yule?
What's the trap? They're going. So this is where they have Shifter, right?
Not yet.
What is the plan? The plan is
I'll tell you. You ready?
They're going to use Corny to get.
They're going to reveal information to Corny.
Oh, that's what it was.
They know he's going to spread, and they say it's going to spread like the clap. And what they're hoping is that the information will get out, and it will cause the rebels to descend on where Colonel Zwad is hiding, because Goblin or One Eye, one of them, knows. They're able to use divination to determine the location of Zwad.
Right.
He's hiding in a whorehouse about a mile away. So they deliver this information to Corny. They tell Corny to go do about his business because they don't need him right now. So they know he's going to spread that information. So very carefully, the rebel go and they descend on Zwad and they capture him. And then they take him to another location, and it's a basement and a sub-basement of the basement. And it's a torture chamber, and they torture him for information down there. That was Elmo's plan anyway. But in the process, when the rebel goes to pick up Zawad is able to get a message off to the Limper warning him that he's being captured or been captured. So the Limper is on his way to this town, to Ur. So that's not a good thing, because the Limper is obviously powerful and a problem. So I guess Soulcatcher gets wind that the Limper is up in arms. It's not real clear on how he heard this, but he knows that the Limper heard something. So he contacts Goblin. He's like, what's going on? No, it's One Eye. It is One Eye, because he gets a hold of Goblin, and Goblin's like, no, One Eye went with the Turn Patrol. So he gets a hold of One Eye, and he says he's going to send some help, because you guys you're doing what I want you to do, but you're doing it in a very roughshod manner. So I'm going to send you a very helpful guest, basically.
Yeah.
And that guest is called Shifter, also known as Shapeshifter. When Shifter shows up in town, his description is crazy. He's the size of a house and half as wide.
Is he being flowery when he says that?
He is. He's exaggerating, but he's a big guy. And he's wearing scarlet robes that are faded. He has this beautifully carved staff, which is an elongated woman, essentially, that rumor is used to be a real woman and is now his staff. But his face, like his beard, is so wiry and full of filth that his face is basically obscured. Croker cannot tell you what color his eyes are, because they glow with this like fierce fire, and it's very hard to look at the guy. And his fingers, he describes his fingers as being like the size of sausages. So he's really a big fella. All right, so the staff, Shapeshifter and Limper, they're all connected. Shapeshifter hates the Limper. We've known that for a little while. But the reason for the enmity is that staff. The woman apparently cheated on Shapeshifter with Limper, and then Shapeshifter turned her into a staff. This was 400 years ago. This was during the domination.
So you have Shapeshifter is Soulcatcher's closest ally among the 10 who were taken.
Right.
His enmity for the Limper is more virulent than our patrons,
which is crazy.
Yeah.
Because he's so casual about how he deals with the upcoming situation. It doesn't seem like it's hatred, it seems like extremely calculated, well thought out, and very, very calmly, enacted.
Right.
There's something that he said that I thought was kind of interesting and I'm confused by, and I don't know if you caught it as well, but Croker says that he himself was like a sour stench in Shifter's nostrils. Do you remember that?
No, I do not.
I don't understand why that would be. There's a moment where when Shifter first shows up, he puts the feet of his staff on Raven's chest and he heals him.
Right. He asks him to get him healed. Yeah.
He heals him really quickly.
Right.
Like he says that he relaxes. You could see all the pain left his body. All of the scar tissue became red and then slowly became white like old scars. Like he healed this guy really, really fast. And it's at that point that Croker describes, like, he looks at Croker and Croker's like, he looks at me like, I'm a sour stench in his nostril. So Croker's like, hey, can you heal everybody else while we're waiting? And he does, which is crazy, but he does.
Well, maybe it's just that, he is kind of described as being yucky, I guess. And to say that he looked at Croker like he's the stench in his nostril, right?
Yeah.
Is kind of like Yeah, you thought I was dirty. You're really the dirty one.
I don't understand it, though. I was wondering if it was because Croker's a healer, but then he goes and he heals this guy.
You ain't half the healer you think you are.
I just don't know, man. It's like he definitely has disdain for Croker, at least in that moment, but it's not really. It's not.
It might be more like, hey, you're just here.
You're just a peasant.
You're at this level. I'm a little higher than you, if not a lot.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
It's just ranking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to rank yourself or let someone know their rank.
Sure.
It's a common theme in this with the black company. You don't respect us. We're going to let you know. The people in the city in the beginning, like when they're in the water gardens, the people didn't respect them. They don't know the black company. They have an air about them when they talk to members of the black company. The nasally voice guy, he kind of mentions it a couple times. Lane was also a nasally voiced guy. People up north here, they're not.
Yeah. Well, they're talking down to the black company because they don't know who the black company is. They just assume they're a mercenary band of no repute, but they're extraordinarily professional.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they're basically like a private military, right?
Sounds that way, yeah.
All right. So anyway, Shifter has arrived in town. He's on the scene. The Limper is on his way. Shifter arrived before him. And Shifter's like, hey, let's go ahead and set a trap for the Limper. So they've already killed Corny. They did that a little bit earlier because they were like, he's the only person that knows. He knows too much information. He's got to go. So they killed him. And then Shifter's like, hey, bring his body over here. I want to play with it. So he basically reanimates the body, or he becomes the body. I think it's a glamour, and he takes on the appearance of the body.
I think that's what it is, yeah, because
he's able to turn Croker into somebody else, and
yeah, he makes himself look like members of
the Rebel Command.
Yeah, previous that I'm assuming are dead now.
No, they're alive.
Oh no, they are alive.
They're all alive.
Except for Candy. And they're going to pretend
Corny.
Oh, is it Corny? Who's Candy?
He's one of the black company.
Oh, that's right. Corny, I mean. Yeah, so the Shifters being Corny, and those other guys are going to be the rebels.
Yes. Okay, so under the glamour, the disguise, Shifter, Croker, Elmo, and I think the lieutenant, they go to the whorehouse where Zawad is being held. They just kind of saunter in as rebel commanders being led by Corny, and the rebels are like, "Oh shit, we probably should have reported this, and we didn't. Oh well." So they let him watch while they torture Zawad. And Croker kind of has to close his eyes because he values the healing of the body too much to watch somebody be broken like this. But it's during this moment when you can hear, oh, I'm sorry, Raven. They brought Raven along with them. You can hear the drag thump of the Limper. And like his approach is causing an earthquake, strangely enough. And I'm not sure why, but they're all, everybody's terrified. The rebels, I mean, this guy's an enemy, and they know he's here. He's here. Like, the guy that they're torturing basically led on that, come help me. And the Limper's arrived. He's at the whorehouse, and they're hiding down in the basement, trying to get away, trying to go undetected, as it were. And it turns into a huge mess. And Shifter allows the glamour to drop so that Zawad realizes that he is now in the hands of his mortal enemy, Raven. Then he puts the disguise back up, and the Limper appears at the top of the stairs. The basement is starting to collapse from whatever Limper's doing up top. And Shifter does some weird magic with his fingers that Croker notices, and it creates some kind of blast that one further collapses the basement, but also completely disables Limper, knocks him to the ground. Croaker, he runs for it. He gets upstairs out. He steps over the body and he says that it's just a little man. The Limper is just a small man wearing brown, but he's out of there. He's gone. Shifter gets out as well. And no, that's what it is. Shifter grabs him. He's like, no, you can't leave. Help me dump his body down in the basement. So they roll him into the basement and then let the earthquake continue. He does some more magic and he fills in the basement a little bit and buries Limper down there. Raven doesn't get out. Zawad doesn't get out. Limper's down in the basement. A whole bunch of the rebels tried to escape, but Elmo, he's up top cutting them down as they flee, killing everybody, just like in chapter 1.
Yeah, they really have no problem slaughtering people.
No, they don't. Absolutely not.
Killing in cold blood is something they've just done, and now they're doing this.
Well, they are their enemies. Even though they're not defending themselves, they are the enemy. And Elmo's killing them. All right, so that basically ends the chapter. There are a couple of more details that we'll get to. Of important note, while they were down in the basement and they were watching the torture. This is on page 93 for anybody that's got my edition, your edition. Okay, so these guys said they were the good guys, referring to the rebels. But in method, they were no better than the Limper. I mean, and it's true. They're torturing. It's a torture chamber. It's not like this is just they set this up for one time because they happened to come across a guy. No, it is a torture chamber. It's a dedicated torture chamber that exists in this sub-basement. And so it's a little bit ambivalent, these are not good people.
The thing is that if you're gonna war, or I don't know, I mean, it's gonna happen regardless. Even if you are on the side of the angels, there's probably gonna come a point in time where you're gonna shackle somebody up, I guess. You need information, everybody thinks their cause is just, and it's usually it's victors that decide whether or not that is the case
with their little histories.
With their little histories, with their croakers and what's written and stuff.
Sure. Well, it is a recurring theme in these books that is just going to get more and more obvious as we go on. I think this is really the first. There may have been one in chapter 1, but this is a pretty early indication that there's some blurring of the lines as far as who's good and who's bad. Okay, so as soon as all this settles, the dust kind of settles, Shifter just disappears. He's gone. He doesn't say goodbye. No, he's just gone. And Croaker starts thinking about it, and I think he's talking to Elmo, and they realize that they were just very, very craftily placed on the front lines of the battle between Limper and Soulcatcher. And it's not necessarily a good place to be. And they kind of want to get the F out of there. So Croaker is tasked with telling Darling that Raven is dead. And he thinks about it the whole way home. And I guess a couple of days go by, and they're packing up. And a rider comes through the gates, and Darling's clapping her hands, and Raven comes riding through the gate. And he picks her up, puts her on the saddle, and tells the captain that I'm done. I've gotten all 5. I don't have any other business anymore. I'm yours. And they welcome him to the family. And that's the end of chapter 2.
And that's how Raven becomes a member.
Yeah. Good Lord, right?
Yeah, I guess when we were talking about, summarizing it, maybe we should have just said, this is how Raven becomes a member of the Black Company. But there's so many different elements that are going on to make that happen. It's cool. It's good. I like the way. And then not only that, not only have they done the bidding of Soulcatcher,
Yeah,
and put themselves in a very precarious situation,
definitely.
but they also were put in a situation by Raven to make sure that his last member was that he wanted to kill.
Yes.
They were involved in it.
Right.
Linking them even more so.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it is also understood that, the Limper is still around.
Yeah. No, he's going to get out of there. I mean, he was buried for 400 years. This is just a hiccup, speed bump, as it were. Okay, so this is how it goes. While the Limper was buried, because apparently it lasted for more than a couple of minutes, the Raker, who is his opposition in that area, Forsberg area, he launched a major offensive while the Limper was digging his way out of the rubble. He did so unaware that his enemy was absent from the field, but the effect was the same. The Limper's army collapsed. The Black Company's victory went for naught. Rebel bands whooped through ore, hunting the lady's agents. Thanks to Soulcatcher's foresight, the Black Company was already on the move south when the collapse came, so they completely avoided involvement. Soulcatcher looks really, really good right now because he and his armies have only had success. Limper looks really, really bad right now because he and his armies have been routed. And Limper knows exactly who did this to him.
And Limper already had a problem with Raven anyway.
Yeah.
So now Raven is hitched with the Black Company, who have done something bad against Limper. It's just, if that guy ever steps up again, it's going to be, someone's going to have a problem with somebody.
Well, I'm looking forward to chapter 3. What about you?
Raker's the next chapter.
Raker's the next chapter. Yeah. I don't know, man. I'm looking forward to it. That's all I have to say. I read this chapter twice. Once last night, once this morning. Took notes both times. Definitely more clearly understood this read than I was on my initial read 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever it was.
The only thing I would say is sometimes, depending on how I'm reading, and if I'm really, really concentrated, what happens is there's since they are moving often and they are often playing cards.
Yeah, kind of blurs together.
It does. It's like, oh, I thought this scene happened here. It really doesn't matter ultimately, except for where certain pieces of information are parsed out.
Yeah.
As far as you don't want to know that Raven lives at the end of the story or the chapter.
Until the end of the chapter.
That's the beginning, the middle, and the end. But there's all those little pieces in between that, are nice little nuggets that you come across, but probably play more of an importance, overall as the book goes on.
Right.
Yeah. Good book. Good chapter. I liked it. It was a very good character piece. We got to know all of the Goblin and all of the One-Eye little feuding that they have going on.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool. We know a lot more about the Captain because of his association with Raven. They have a little bit more, and the Captain is very much an anomaly to Croker, even though they've been around each other for a long time.
A very long time. Yeah, no, there's a very brief chapter at some point in time that explains exactly how much they know about the Captain. And it's like they know that he was born in one of the jeweled cities, and that's about it. He was a professional military man, and then he gave it all up. And
he assumes there's a woman involved also.
Yeah, but he doesn't know.
And really a woman involved, because Croker says that everybody says that there's some, they have some sort of a romantic notion that there was some lady involved, but what ultimately is that these people that he surrounded himself were basically thieves and cutthroats and not very nice people.
Well, running from the law.
Yeah, running from the law. And the Captain, on the other hand, is a good person.
Right.
Or at least it seems that way.
He does seem that way. Trying to think if there's anything. I wanted to mention something about the Oh yeah. The podcast with Glenn Cook. What did he say? He was talking about Goblin and One Eye, and like he said that pretty much everybody that's in the Black Company are people that he knew when he was in the service.
I believe that.
And so, like Goblin and One Eye, those were two of the guys that he knew. You know, they were always fighting. They were always bickering or playing jokes on each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's importantly, like when Goblin's down, One Eye's like, "What's going on? Is he okay?" You know, because like as much as they bicker and fight with one each other, you know, they're buddies. You know, they're friends.
Band of brothers.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's a good episode. All right, Yule.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us for this endeavor today.
No problem.
This is the Black Company, Chapter 2. We're going to sign off at this point, essentially. We'll do Chapter 3 as soon as we possibly can, but it'll probably be 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month. But yeah, Philip had to take off a little bit early. It's okay. He wasn't really contributing anyway. What a jerk. I know.
So make sure everybody read Chapter 3, Raker, and join us